Greetings everyone, I'm Jed Schlackman. I work as a holistic counselor, an energy healer and hypnotherapist, as well as a psychotherapist. So I work with people who are addressing a variety of health concerns, both physical and mental, as well as personal growth or spiritual development. Today's video is one that covers a topic that's somewhat esoteric in the field of healing and health, and it kind of connects multiple disciplines or multiple fields of science. I'll be speaking about magnetism, electromagnetism in the earth, and also about deuterium, an isotope of hydrogen, and how that relates to the functioning of our mitochondria in our body, the organelles, you could call them, within the cells that are associated with energy production, with our energy cycles, and how the impairment of the mitochondria plays a role in many different illnesses or diseases or disorders that people may be diagnosed with, since it's fundamental to energy and the cycles of metabolism that are occurring in our body. Anything that impairs the mitochondria or disrupts their function would lead to some type of visible symptom, whether it's physical health conditions or psychiatric diagnoses. It's going to have some effect, and often multiple effects. So first I want to speak a little bit about the concept of electromagnetism, because if we think about our physical body, we need to realize that it's not just a physical form with physiology and anatomy and biochemistry. It's actually kind of the outer or most dense shell of the system of energy, of multiple layers or levels of energy. In the metaphysical field, we speak of different energy bodies that are part of the aura or the biofield. So the physical body and chemistry, your physical form, how the body is forming and maintaining itself, how the chemicals are being produced and regulated within your body, that's governed by what's happening on a deeper level on the energetic layers, which includes consciousness, that includes our thoughts, our beliefs, our emotions. So those are fields and currents of energy that are guiding the physical body in how it is maintaining itself and how it's absorbing minerals or vitamins or proteins, and how it's clearing out metabolic waste, and how it's handling environmental toxins. So both the endotoxins, the waste that the body's creating and accumulating through its own metabolic processes, and the exotoxins, chemicals that you're exposed to in the environment, whether you're touching them, breathing them, having them come through your gut with the food you eat. Your body has to recognize and process and filter all of this, and it's doing it constantly, every second, every moment, every day. Your body is actively maintaining itself, doing its best to keep homeostasis or relative balance or equilibrium, to not allow things to go too extreme in one direction or another. So your body doesn't want to accumulate too much of the various chemicals or toxins that you're exposed to. And it also wants to absorb and hold on to an adequate amount of chemicals or substances that it needs to carry out its daily function to sustain life. So your body is being guided by a really awesome intelligence. You could consider that to be intelligent design. And if we realize that it actually is positive and empowering to us, that we can trust our body and the incredible intelligence that supports our body, the spiritual energy fields that are giving life to whatever we're perceiving here in this physical realm. Now we're going to bring that discussion into the idea of electromagnetism and electricity. These are things that we can, to some extent, actually measure. We can measure electrical currents coming through the body. We can measure electromagnetic fields around the body. And those need to exist within a certain range, a certain intensity for us to be healthy. So if there's, you could say, an excess of electricity, if it's overcharged, that can cause problems. And also if there's a deficiency, that will cause problems. So depending whether it's a deficiency or excess, you will get different types of symptoms. In Oriental medicine, they work a lot with that concept using subtle energy. They refer to chi, or life force energy, and that energy coming through different major centers. They call those the dantians. So there's one in the upper body, one in the middle, one in the lower body. In Ayurveda and yoga, they refer to 7 chakras, energy centers. In Chinese medicine, they work with the meridians, which are kind of like electrical currents continuously circulating, carrying the subtle energy through the body. And their system of diagnosis and treatment uses the concept of excess or deficiency in chi in those different meridians. And the idea is to provide some type of stimulus or catalyst to help restore balance in that energy flow. Now, the planet Earth itself can be considered a living being. It has this physical matter. So you have the Earth and its surface and all the minerals on the planet. Then you have life forms growing. So those different elements giving rise to life. You have water on the planet. And you have an atmosphere. You have the elements in the atmosphere that are supporting life. So Earth is a living being in a collective sense, but also it has countless living beings that it's hosting that are there on the Earth having their life experiences. And for that combination of elements to work to support life, Earth has to maintain its balance, which is affected by the electromagnetic field of the Earth. And of course we know about the Earth's poles, which relate to that magnetism. There's a North Pole and a South Pole. And that's not just the geographic pole, there's actually an electromagnetic pole on the north and south that don't necessarily match exactly with where we identify the geographic poles at. So the electromagnetic poles, they are shifting or going through what's called an excursion, where they're slowly moving across the surface of the planet and not in the exact same place over time. And so as that happens in our modern technological era, we have to adjust our technological devices and systems to account for that movement of the magnetic poles of the Earth. Now, it's known that there are times when those poles in Earth's history have flipped, so the north and south have switched completely. There's also consideration that the geographic poles have shifted over time. And we know that the field strength, the electromagnetic field of the Earth, is not continuously the same. There are periods where it's been stronger, and then times where it gets weaker. The weakening is usually a sign that at some point it's going to shift or flip again. So it's a process that happens over time, and the evidence seems to show that there's kind of an acceleration point just before the flipping of the poles occurs. And there are signs that we're going through that acceleration right now with our planet, where it's preparing for some major flip or major switching of the location of the electromagnetic poles. So as that's happening and that weakening of the Earth's magnetic fields occurring, that means the electromagnetic environment that we exist in as living beings on the planet is changing. So there's less of a field present around us from the Earth. So that's, in a sense, less of a grounding force or aid. There's also the increase in artificial man-made electromagnetic fields with modern technology. So a lot of people talk about electrosmog or electromagnetic pollution, harmful EMFs, and those also can be interfering with or disrupting our natural biological magnetic field. So that's another variable to consider that could be interfering with our mitochondria, with our different biological processes. Now this brings us to the chemical level, chemical elements, and we know there's the periodic table of elements. That's a way of listing and categorizing and organizing the different chemical elements, their atomic structure, and so on. And the first element, number one in the periodic table, hydrogen, is the one we're going to be focusing on here. Hydrogen is everywhere in our environment, in our body. Hydrogen is part of water, H2O. Hydrogen is part of carbohydrates. So if you think of something like a sugar, a C6H12O6 structure for that molecule, you've got the hydrogen atoms in that. We use hydrocarbons for fuel. Petroleum, gasoline, that's a hydrocarbon. There's actually been a lot of debate about how petroleum actually gets created or generated within the Earth. There's the theory that's been dominant for many decades that those hydrocarbons are a result of fossilized plant matter from the history of Earth. And there's a different theory that the Earth is using other processes to continuously create more of those hydrocarbons, so it's not dependent on a limited supply of fossilized material. That would be a whole other discussion, which we don't need to go into for this topic that we're covering today. But just to be aware of how ubiquitous and important hydrogen is in the atmosphere, in plant matter and animal matter and food, water. It's very vital to life. And in our bodies, hydrogen can exist in more than one isotope, more than one form of hydrogen. There are three primary forms or isotopes of hydrogen that are identified. One is called protium, the second one is deuterium, and the third one is tritium. So those names come from the idea that each of them has a different number of neutrons in the atomic structure. So the plain protium version of hydrogen would have one proton, one electron, and 0 neutrons. The deuterium isotope has one of each, one proton, one electron, and one neutron, and the tritium isotope has one electron, one proton, but 2 neutrons. So you could say it's the heaviest of those three isotopes, and it's also the one of them that has the least stability in terms of it maintaining itself over time. After a number of years it would break down, so it doesn't exist permanently in the environment the way the protium or deuterium potentially could. So we have a certain ratio of protium and deuterium as they are existing in the fluids in our body, in the tissues in our body. And that's also the case in just any water that's in the environment. The hydrogen in that water will be in a certain ratio with the protium and deuterium. And you could say that as it becomes higher in deuterium, it becomes heavier in a sense because those atoms have the neutron in them. Now, for our health and balance within our biological system, there has to be maintenance of a certain range there for that ratio. We can't have too little of the deuterium, and we can't have too much of the deuterium relative to the protium. So if you start to accumulate excess of the deuterium in your system, that leads to mitochondrial disruption. It leads to different negative effects. So our body has mechanisms for continually clearing the excess deuterium to keep the ratio within a healthy, manageable range. But a variety of factors can disrupt or interfere with that deuterium clearing or balancing process. And one factor is actually our electromagnetic environment. So when the Earth's electromagnetism weakens, it's more of a challenge for our own individual system to keep clearing that accumulated deuterium. Another factor is sunlight. So when we're out in the sunlight, the natural light frequencies, the ultraviolet and infrared and all of that, those are helping our body with its process of clearing clearing out excess deuterium and keeping it within the healthy range. Our physical activity, so being physically active, exercising and moving, the motion is a form of stimulation of our metabolic processes. It helps getting the lymph flow, so we're clearing out any kind of toxic excess. So movement is important. And our diet can also play a role. With diet, part of that has to do with the deuterium content in foods. Carbohydrates tend to have higher amounts of deuterium than non-high carbohydrate foods. So if you're consuming a lot of sugars, that's likely to increase the buildup of deuterium. And if your ability to break those down and clear it out has been compromised in any way, then the higher carb diets could cause you problems. And you would find that you'll do better with a more keto type diet that lowers the carbs. So we want to be aware of this deuterium concept, since it does play a significant role in our health, in how our mitochondria are functioning, and whether we're developing diseases. Those diseases could continue to worsen or progress if we don't deal with this issue of helping our mitochondria recover and helping with depletion of deuterium so it's not accumulating in excess in our bodies. So for those that are interested in this topic, one of the physicians / scientists who's been speaking and writing about it a lot is Dr. Jack Kruse, and he's a neurosurgeon who spent decades looking at some alternative ideas in health and the energetic layer, the physics aspect of things. So he's been doing a lot of deep dives, you could say, into a more holistic understanding of different health issues, of what's actually creating diseases or illnesses. And consequently, he has suggestions for what to do about the magnetic decline and what to do about accumulation of deuterium. So you can find him on social media, on YouTube. He's been interviewed a lot. So that'll give you a lot more detail, a lot of the science behind it. He's not the only one who's been writing and speaking about deuterium and how it impacts our health. I'm going to read some content now from an article in the Townsend Letter, which is a kind of alternative health journal. It's called Innovative Health Perspectives. And this article in the Townsend Letter is called Submolecular Dysregulation Due to Deuterium Accumulation is the Cause of Cancer. And that's kind of a narrow focus or lens to look at it through, to say that deuterium accumulation in itself is the cause of cancer. It's actually a case where it's part of the process leading to this development of cancer. It's kind of somewhere in the middle of this whole system. So you would be asking the question, what factors or variables are creating that deuterium accumulation? So what's interfering with the body's mitochondria and gut microbiome and whatever would normally enable the maintenance of stable deuterium levels. So that could involve your diet, your exercise or lack thereof, sunlight exposure or lack thereof. It could involve exposure to toxins, to magnetic fields, and it can involve the consciousness layers of energy, psychological stress and trauma and all of that, since those are having an impact on what's going on energetically, which is then regulating the chemistry. So all of that can play a role. But I'll talk about what this article is sharing to give some of a framework or background for understanding why deuterium is something important to look at and to manage or regulate effectively. Thorough understanding of the causation of pathological processes is fundamental to clinical care as it informs and guides the approach to treatment. In this article, and I isn't myself here reading it, but I is the author of the article, will first discuss the prevailing cancer-causing paradigms upon which our current oncology standard of care is largely based. When I say paradigms, I specifically mean the two main narratives that have been the foundation of cancer treatment by most medical centers and academic institutions around the world. These have given rise to a huge industrial complex involving government agencies, pharmaceutical and biomedical firms, hospitals and clinics, universities, professional societies, nonprofit foundations, and the media. So I'll interject that in some way all of those are kind of entrenched with and immersed in those paradigms. The two paradigms are, number one, cells start proliferating in an uncontrolled fashion as a result of tissue damage. Number two, the genetic theory of cancer, also known as the somatic mutation theory. I will also cover other theories and conjectures of the cause of cancer, describe discoveries made in cancer metabolism research, and touch on the hallmarks of cancer. Then I will discuss submolecular regulation. In fact, it is submolecular dysregulation due to deuterium accumulation that causes cancer. Submolecular regulation is the underlying mechanism foundational to the architecture of all of the previous prevailing theories. So this isn't to deny that those other theories aren't based on some valid observed phenomena. It's just kind of integrating things to see it from a different vantage point. Submolecular dysregulation is indeed what gives rise to uncontrolled proliferation, genome transformation, the process of rapidly dividing cells into new phenotypes, what is being described as evolution, and metabolic dysfunction. 3 decades of basic research have confirmed the importance of deuterium in living organisms. The ratio of the two stable hydrogen isotopes, hydrogen, which I would also call protium, and deuterium, is a key signal influencing cellular processes at the submolecular level. The transfer of hydrogen, the protium version of hydrogen, and deuterium to different structural and functional molecules is essential for maintaining normal cellular functions, nucleic acid structure, and protein integrity. Deuterium availability regulates cell growth and is crucial to the start of cell proliferation by modulating DNA structure and size. When the concentration increases to levels above a relatively stable equilibrium, exceeding our physiological and biochemical capacity for deuterium, submolecular dysregulation is the result. Depletion can reverse dysregulation, as has been demonstrated in the published research. Downstream effects of submolecular dysregulation are many and vary greatly. It is those effects that have been pulling research scientists in all directions. Many contradict one another. Integral to submolecular regulation is the ability to efficiently fractionate or discriminate deuterium. Excess deuterium in mitochondria in the cytoplasm is what drives submolecular dysregulation, leading to cancer. This knowledge has largely been ignored. And so then the author goes back to review the different paradigms, the one about excessive growth of cells, the other one about genetic mutation. And so he points out how the research shows that those theories don't provide a supported explanation for cancer. When you look at the actual research data, they're not really accounting for what's actually causing most cancer, or what are the primary factors causing cancer. And here's a quote that says, Memorial Sloan Kettering conducted analyses of 25,000 patients over a period of 6 years and explored the question of whether it's possible to look at an individual tumor and, based on its genomic profile alone, predict its precise future metastatic trajectory. The answer is clearly no. The study was revealing in other ways. The data showed that metastatic disease is genomically entirely different from the primary disease. They analyzed over 50 tumor types and close to 100,000 metastases. Another important clue of the failure of the somatic mutation theory is the fact that cancer patients have lots of mutations, but so do cancer-free people. A 2012 detailed analysis of 31,717 cancer cases concluded that the vast majority of, if not all, aberrations that were observed in the cancer-affected cohort were also seen in the cancer-free subjects. So there's a lot more you can read in that article in the Townsend letter. It also points out how using deuterium depletion as a therapy for cancer patients led to a much greater extension in survival than the kind of conventional mainstream cancer therapies like chemotherapy and immunotherapy. So it seems that addressing deuterium was helping things out on a more deep and lasting level than the other oncology approaches that have been the standard of care. So we want to understand how to help clear out the excess deuterium. Jack Kruse talks about working with the vagus nerve, because that nerve helps connect the gut and the brain and the nervous system, and shifting between different modes that we're in. Are we in an emergency survival mode? Are we in a relaxed mode? Are we able to detox and clear things out? Or are we kind of stuck in what he calls a lattice lock, where we're not able to clear out that excess deuterium? So he's recommending things to address the vagus nerve. He's also talking about movement. He recommends chewing mastic gum, which is an herbal resin gum. He recommends sunlight exposure. And of course, if you've been isolated, if you've consistently been avoiding the sun, you'd have to kind of gradually build up your sun exposure, because you're not adapted, and too much right away could be an overload. It could give you sunburn and too much oxidative stress in that sense. So you want to implement that in a slow, steady way, not overload your system. Same thing with exercise. If you're in too compromised a state, then exercise produces oxidative stress in your body, and that could actually aggravate your health conditions. So you'd want to help with this deuterium depletion perhaps in other ways first before doing too much exercise, too much kind of aggressive movement. You want to start gently, being mindful of your electromagnetic environment, cutting out all the man-made electromagnetic frequencies, the blue light, the LED lights, avoiding those, especially at night. And you want to find kind of a more grounded environment. You can use some of the grounding tools or products that are sold if you don't have a naturally grounding environment. And with diet, you could be conscious of that too. If your clearance of deuterium is compromised, then don't have too much carbohydrates at one time. Don't use processed foods and refined supplements and things that actually end up concentrating deuterium even more. You want to have a light input or reduced input of deuterium so your system can catch up and clear out the excess. For those that are interested in holistic health and spiritual well-being, I invite you to visit my website, phinsights.com, phinsights.com. And for now, I wish everyone a pleasant day. Namaste.